Do your Midjourney characters keep looking stale, bored, or as many of the haters say, soulless? You've been so focused on trying to get the outfit of your character right, or trying to place multiple characters in a scene. But somehow, along the way, you completely forgot to give them a personality. Let's face it, life is bland without emotions. So today, we're going to inject our character with passion. You'll be amazed to see the unbelievable range that your characters can have. And if you stick around until the end of the video, you'll find out how I created some of these shockingly artistic images. So come along for the ride and take your characters to the next level. Alright, so today's video is going to be a little less technical than the previous one. The actual process will still be important, however, we're going to spend a lot of time going through a wide range of emotions and expressions. In fact, for the most part, the prompts will not be changing very much. However, it's still important that you pay attention to how I use my words. And most of all, I think you're going to be quite surprised how nuanced your character's expressions can get. Creating our character concept. So let's start off by fine-tuning our character concept for a close-up portrait. I'm going to create a number of close-up portraits of Carla from various different angles. And I'm going to pick a total of 8 different images. However, bear in mind that usually you don't need to use that many images. In most cases, 2 or 3 will be absolutely enough. So here's the first prompt. Imagine frontal close-up on white background, beautiful woman, bright red braided bun hair, only red hair, in the style of a Marvel comic book. So from this set of 4 images, I really like the top right and the bottom right images. And that's why I'm going to react with the envelope icon in order to get the URLs of each one of these 2 images. Now you might be wondering whether you need to upscale these images as well. You can absolutely do that if you want to. However, from my experience, it's not necessarily something that you need to do for this particular use case. Next, I'm going to re-roll the very same prompt. Now, from this particular set of images, I'm going to use the top right one. Once again, I'll react with my envelope icon in order to get the URL of that specific image. Next, I'm going to make a very slight change to the prompt. As you can see, I've added the words frontal view. I honestly do not know whether it will help, but I really want to get Carla in a more frontal position. Okay, so in this case, at least I got the top left image, which roughly fits what I was looking for, a more frontal perspective. So that's why I'm going to keep this image. I'm also going to keep the bottom right one, simply because I kind of like it. So far, I've collected 5 images in total. I'm now going to re-roll the prompt. So from this set of 4, I'm once again going to pick the top right one because this is a frontal shot as well. Now I'm still missing a shot or 2 from the back of her head. Technically, we don't really need to do this for today's exercise, but I do know that a lot of people are having trouble creating headshots of their characters while they're looking away or into another direction. So let me show you how that's done with the following prompt. I've only made a very slight change, but the critical phrase here is headshot of back of head. And as you can see in our images right here, it actually works quite well. So from this set of 4 images, I'm going to keep the 2 top ones. And that now gives us a total of 8 images. So what next? Blending the character. So now let's see what happens if I simply blend together all 8 of these image references and create a new image. Imagine, and then I enter the URLs of every single one of these 8 reference images that I recovered by reacting with the envelope icon and then retrieving the URL from the DMs with the Midjourney bot. And what we end up with is an extremely detailed and very consistent Carla character. So you might be wondering whether this is a genuine alternative to the original process and method that I showed you in part 1 of this series. And yes, it absolutely is. Okay, so next, you might think that you could simply reuse these image reference and just add a word or 2 and get a really good image. But I'm afraid that's not how this works, and I'm going to prove it to you by showing you this prompt. Imagine, and then we add all of our 8 image prompts, followed by the simple word smiling. And as you can see, even though these images are actually quite nice, they're only very remotely related to our character. So why exactly is that? Well, it seems that the entire collection of image prompts that we've added as a whole get about the same weight in the prompt as the text weight. So you're effectively blending a random smiling concept with our character reference. And that character reference doesn't have enough weight, since in Midjourney version 4, we cannot control the weight of the image prompt. So it's absolutely crucial that you use these image reference in combination with the original or at least a very similar text prompt. So let's add our original prompt and have a look at what we get. Imagine, and then we start off with our 8 image references, followed by portrait on white background, beautiful woman, bright red braided bun hair, only red hair in the style of a comic book. And here's our set of 4 images. By the way, from here you can actually get different angle shots of your blended character. All you need to do is change your text prompt in order to reflect different angles and positions of your character, and then it will produce relevant images that actually show your new character from those positions. But that's not what we're here to do. So let's actually start going through a list of emotions, creating emotional facial expressions. So by default, whenever you create portrait images, your character will tend to have facial expressions that are very common throughout the photography world, particularly during photo shoots. Some are neutral, some are flirty, and some are just mysterious. So how about we start by giving Carla a very simple smile. Here's what that prompt would look like. Imagine then our 8 image references followed by a text prompt. And as you can see, I've replaced beautiful woman with smile on her face. And that's literally all you need to do. And here's what she looks like. Amazing what such a small and tiny difference makes. So how about we try to make that smile just a little bit bigger? So in this case, I've replaced woman with a smile on her face with extremely happy woman with huge smile on her face. And as you can see from these images, these small nuances actually make a huge difference. However, it's also important to note that whenever you use exaggerated concepts such as extreme, it's going to have a much bigger impact on the look of your character as well. In this particular case, you can see that Carla has much more pronounced cheeks, and it's not just because she's smiling. It's a little bit more obvious if we try to make Carla laugh. In this example, I've replaced our expression with woman laughing out loud, extreme laughter, hilarity, amusement. And I think these images largely speak for themselves. But it's great to see how much control we actually have over our character, isn't it? So how about we go one step further? This time I've used the expression woman laughing with open mouth, woman dying from laughter. And once again, the nuances are clearly visible in this set of 4 images. Not all of these expressions are easy to get right though, especially when there are different ways you might interpret a certain type of text prompt. In this next example, I want to make Carla look ecstatic or euphoric. I used the expression very excited woman, elated in excitement, and ecstatic. So even though I'm more or less happy with the results I got here, not all of these images may have been what most of you have expected. So let's move on to the next one because there's a lot more to come. Let's give Carla a flirty look. I used the expression woman flirting with camera and extremely flirty woman. So in this example, you mostly see it in the position of her head, particularly her eyes, and that very slight smile on her face. Now, all of these have been mostly positive. It's time to move to something slightly more serious. In this next prompt, I want Carla to have a very serious and stern look on her face. So I replaced my expression with woman with serious look on face, very stern woman. Okay, so even though I would have expected something with a bit more seriousness, her facial expression does look very controlled, and you can see in her eyes that she's seizing something. Next, let's create a pouty version of Carla. Yeah, we can do that too. This time I used woman with pouty look on her face, woman with mopey facial expression, grouchy woman. And sure enough, that's exactly what we got. I personally think that the words mopey and grouchy did the trick here. We're now slowly going to move towards some much stronger emotions. Let's start off with disgust and repulsion. So all I added here was disgusted woman and extreme repulsion. Now, personally, I was quite surprised how well this one worked out. However, if you look at these images, I think they're pretty much on point. So what about anger and resentment? Is that something Midjourney can give us as well? In this one, I replaced the expression with woman full of anger and resentment, upset, frustration. And sure enough, that's exactly what the images look like. Carla isn't quite yelling or screaming yet. However, you can clearly see the resentment in her eyes. Okay, I think you all know what's coming next. I've used the very strong expression, very angry woman screaming her lungs out, pure anger, hate. Or what you could also do is you could add the word rage somewhere in there. Because as you can see, the images that this produces are full of rage. Now, after all of this deep anger and resentment and rage, Carla has started to feel a very deep sadness inside of her. The expression that I use in this prompt is extremely depressed woman, deep sadness, full of sorrow, sad mood. And looking at these 4 images, I think it's quite evident that this character has been through some really traumatic events. She isn't quite crying yet, but we can make her do that too. Simply change the expression to woman crying with open mouth in tears. And this time, even though it's quite difficult to identify the actual tears in the images, it's quite obvious that she's crying. The only thing that bothers me about this image is that for some reason, Midjourney has made her eyes turn blank, or they're kind of rolled up or something. I don't know what it is, but it looks a bit creepy. Okay, so we're almost done with a full range of emotions here. Next up is fear. This time I used woman in fear, scared woman, shiver in fear. Now, if I'm going to be very honest here, I'm not really happy with these. The only one of these 4 that more or less hits the mark is the bottom left one. Unfortunately, the others don't really give me that vibe of someone who's in fear or afraid of something. Unfortunately, I also can't really use the word horror in this prompt because Midjourney has a tendency of turning her into a zombie for whatever reason. So let's move on to our very last core emotion, shock and amazement. So I replaced the expression with surprised woman, shock, amazement. And while I think that the expressions that we got here are actually pretty good, I have no idea why Midjourney is just insisting on making her cross-eyed. I have no idea. It's like, look at that. On the bottom left, top right, same thing. Why? Anyway, so this mostly covers the full range of emotions that you could reasonably think of. Of course, there will be nuances and slight differences, but this is the basic set that everyone's going to use. So does that mean that we're now done with this video? Absolutely not. We're far from it. I actually think that you're going to particularly like the rest of the video, because you'll be surprised how far we can take this. Just one thing before we move on. So far, we've mostly been interacting via YouTube, and quite a few of you are already members in my Tokenized AI Discord community. However, I did decide that it might be a good idea for me to start posting more on Twitter as well. So if you're on Twitter a lot and you'd like to read more of my thoughts and ideas in real time, then make sure you follow my Twitter at Chris Heidorn. You'll also find the link in the description below. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Let's move on. Creating more lively portraits. All right, so now we're going to move on to the more interesting stuff. We're now going to take what we just learned and expand on it by using multi-prompts. Just to be clear, the objective here is not to create a picture-perfect representation of our character. Instead, what I want to show you here is that this is not where it ends. This is where the fun really starts. So let's create some more interesting portraits for 3 of the emotions that I just showed you. I'm going to start off with our example of a laughing Carla, and we're going to use a very simple multi-prompt to do it. As you can see, our prompt hasn't fundamentally changed. All I've done is I've added a second segment that reads red-haired woman laughing with open mouth in the style of a Marvel comic book. And I've also added an aspect ratio of 2:3 for a more dramatic effect. And I think we can all agree that these 4 portraits have a really, really nice touch to them. So let's see what this looks like if we use the same process for anger. Once again, I haven't made many changes. I've just used the original prompt and added a second segment that mirrors the core element of the expression. And what we get are 4 images with a much more creative vibe. Okay, so let's do one more for when Carla is crying. What's interesting about this one is that in this example, I even forgot to mention her hair color in the second segment. And yet, these are images of an obviously deeply depressed woman. So you might be wondering, where am I actually going with all of this? Well, we're going to need these images for the final part of this video, the grand finale, creating an artistic portrait. So for this last part, I created another character concept. I started off by blending these 3 portrait shots with my original core concept. Imagine, and then we add 3 image prompts, followed by frontal portrait on white background, beautiful woman, bright red braided bun hair, only red hair, in the style of a Marvel comic book. I'm trying to get a really clean frontal portrait of Carla. And from this set of 4 that I get, I'm going to keep the bottom right one, because this is where she's looking straight into the camera. Next, I need a full body shot of Carla as well. For this, I'm going to use the same prompt that I used in part 3 and part 4 of the series. And from this set of 4, I'm going to use the bottom right one. In both cases, I upscaled the images, and then I basically just replaced the head on this full body character of Carla with the headshot that we produced earlier. So why did I do this? Well, I want to keep as much of her original hairstyle as possible. If I just use the body shot as is, then all of the images that we generate are going to have a Carla character that has long hair. By replacing her head, I'm increasing the likelihood of getting hairstyles that have buns as well. Okay, so let's move on. And this time we're going to start with anger. So what I've done here is I've added the full body image reference. Then I've also used a wide angle full body shot in the text prompt. But the rest of the prompt is essentially the same multi-prompt that we used earlier. So if we check out these images, these angles are what is usually referred to as a cowboy shot. And these, as standalone images, are already quite dynamic. And as you can see, we've even managed to inject some of that hairstyle into 3 of the 4 images. But the next step is where the real magic comes into play. We're now going to create a mashup of one of these 4 images and one of the creative headshots that we created in the earlier chapter. Now, the only thing we've changed here is that we no longer have a single image reference, but instead we've replaced it with 2 image references, and the text prompt is still the same. Now check out these images. I think it's fair to say that these are on an entirely different level. So let's try doing this on some of the other examples. We'll start off by creating the cowboy shots of our laughing Carla. Once again, the structure of the prompt is the same. Only the emotional expression in this case is different. So from this set of 4 images, we'll use the top left one this time. And from our portraits, we'll use this one right here. And if we put it all together, then our prompt looks like this. And here's our final set of images. Quite an upgrade, isn't it? Now, I'm not going to go through the entire process again, but I do want to show you what I managed to get when I put these 2 images together using the exact same process. So in this example, everything is more or less the same. The process is the same. The prompt is the same, except that we've done it for Carla's very, very depressed and crying expression. And if you have a look at them from close up, it's pretty shocking, isn't it? It just goes to show you that creating beautiful artwork in Midjourney is not as simple as just entering a basic text prompt. It's not even as simple as combining a text prompt with an image prompt. And even if you're using advanced multi-prompts, that's not necessarily going to do it all by itself. It's a complex process of creating, adding, and reusing ingredients in order to create a final piece, something that could not have been done with a very simple text prompt. So this concludes part 5 of my character design series. In part 6, I'll show you how I turn this image of Carla into this. And once it's live, you'll find it right here in the corner of the screen. If you missed the last episode, then go catch up on that content by watching part 4 right here. And if you're new to the channel, go check out the entire character design playlist right here. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment, keep on learning, and take care.